Hi everyone, welcome to the University of Queensland Ochsner Virtual Open House. My name is Ashlee and I'm the coordinator for Ochsner and International Partnerships here in UQ in Brisbane. Before we get started, I'd just like to take you through how this session will flow. Okay, next slide, thanks. Our first session, commencing shortly, will explain how our unique MD Ochsner program came about. Professor Amedee and Dr. Joseph will also give you an overview of the program, as well as take you through how our graduates have performed in the match and other residencies. Following this, I'll return to take you through our entry requirements and application process, as well as answer a few frequently asked questions. In the final session, we'll host a panel of graduates and current students and ask them about their experiences studying with UQ-Ochsner. Following the first session, our student chat will then open for you to ask questions of some of our student ambassadors. You can then access the chat rooms by clicking back to the timeline in the app. The admissions team will open, the admissions team chat will open following the second session, but I'd encourage you to stick around as many of your questions could be answered in that session. After today's event has concluded, we'll be putting this recording of the session on YouTube so you can access this in case you've missed anything or want to refer to it later on. Thank you. Next slide. Today, we're lucky to be joined by some of our academic staff and students. First, you'll be hearing from Professor Ron Amedee, as well as being our head of the UQ-Ochsner Clinical School. He is also the Dean of Medical Education at Ochsner Health. Joining him is Dr. Marlon Joseph, our Admissions and Enrollment Officer, and the General Practice Clerkship Director. Both Dr. Joseph and Professor Amedee will share more about themselves momentarily. You'll be hearing from me again in session 2. The team both here in New Orleans and in Brisbane will work with you to submit your application, guide you through the process and update you on requirements and congratulate you when you arrive here for orientation on day 1. My role continues as I work with the Ochsner cohort, primarily as your liaison for years 1 and 2 of the program. Finally, in session 3, we'll be hearing from Dr. Marcus Davis. He's graduated from our program in 2021 and went on to do his residency in family medicine at East Jefferson General Hospital in Louisiana. Since last year, Dr. Davis has been a primary care physician at Ochsner Health. We'll also have Tamana Gill on the panel. She's a 3rd-year medical student from Sacramento. She's recently moved from Brisbane to New Orleans for the 2nd phase of her studies, and we're looking forward to hearing more on that later. Dr. Davis and Tamana will also be joined by Young Hong, one of our 2nd-year med students here in Brisbane. Young is originally from South Korea, but grew up in Los Angeles, and we'll hear how his time in Australia is going so far. So that's it for introductions. So let me now hand over to you, Professor Amedee.
Thank you, Ash, so much. I appreciate it very much, and welcome to everyone to our virtual open house event. I'm Ron Amedee, and it's my privilege to serve as the director of the Ochsner Clinical School here in New Orleans. By training, I'm a board-certified otolaryngologist, and my subspecialty is otology, neurotology, and skull-base surgery. I've been at Ochsner for roughly 20 years, and I have spent over 40 years in various leadership positions, including clinical, departmental, and institutional. And I've had a number of interesting paths along the way that have got me to where I am here today, but I feel like I have saved the best juice in my life for the very last, and it's a wonderful time to be spending with all of our students and future students. Next slide, please. I'm coming to you this afternoon from Ochsner Health on Jefferson Highway in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is the hub of our spoke of the system that I'll talk about in future slides. But I want to briefly give you a little bit of history about the Ochsner Clinic and its genesis. It was founded in 1942. So January the 2nd this year, we celebrated our 86th anniversary. And on that particular slide, if you look to the right side, the black and white photos, the gentleman standing on the far right is actually Alton Ochsner, and the facility is his namesake. These five gentlemen were all clinical chairs of departments at Tulane University School of Medicine in 1942 when Dr. Ochsner got the bright idea that the future of healthcare was going to be practiced in a multi specialty group practice forum. And when you think about it, in 1942, that was the furthest thing from organized medicine's idea of how medicine was to be practiced in the 40s and 50s, at least in the United States. But when you think about where we are today, all the major academic health science centers in the United States and really around the world practice in a multi specialty group practice. So our founders were way ahead of their time. Um, their vision at the time of finding the clinic was to provide the highest quality medical care, ensuring patients had personalized and complete care. And you can see listed on this slide today's core values of our institution. And our mission is to heal, serve, lead, educate, and innovate. And I love the values of Ochsner and the mission of Ochsner because they very closely align with those of our partners in Brisbane. Next slide, please. Although the clinic was founded in 1942, we took in our first class of residents in 1944. So we've been in the GME business since that time. And those first residents all came to us from Tulane University School of Medicine. And within 4 years' time, the Ochsner Clinic had actually increased its residents five or six-fold. So the number gradually grew. Today, we're a little under 400 residents and fellows in training in 38 ACGME accredited programs. And Ochsner's history of outstanding quality patient care and comprehensive training throughout the medical continuum is well known nationally and internationally. We have, as I said, the hub. I'm coming to you from the hub today, but the spoke involves 47 hospitals and 370 plus health centers, which are spread throughout the Deep South, including Louisiana, Mississippi, the Florida Panhandle, and now South Carolina. At our hub, we have over 4,900 physicians and advanced practice providers taking care of patients in over 95 specialties. Our institution is actually the largest private employer in the state of Louisiana with over 40,000 team members. And Ochsner Health has been voted the number one hospital in Louisiana, according to U.S. News and World Report, for the last 10 consecutive years. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about the history of the University of Queensland. The university itself goes back to 1909. The medical school came about in 1936, so they're a little bit older than we are. They're celebrating their 90th year this year. And it's kind of interesting to note that when the school first opened, the faculties were around the arts, the sciences, and engineering, and it was composed of 60 men and roughly 23 women. And I have to reflect on those numbers because today, when I look at the numbers of students coming into medical school and into residency and fellowship training, it's at least 50-50, if not a slight female trend. I can tell you that many of our classes that we've taken in the past 12, 14 years have been predominantly female. We're very proud of that also. Initial locations in Brisbane included the old Government House and also the Victoria Park, which is where the current medical school is located now since 1922. Current campuses include where you will be training primarily in your first 2 years on the St. Lucia campus, the Gatton campus, Hurston campus, and also Dutton Park, which was opened in 2024. Next slide. I already mentioned that the medical school came about in 1936, celebrating its 90th year this year. It was Queensland's first medical school and is currently Australia's largest medical program, with class sizes ranging from around 450 to 500 students per year, and roughly 90 to 100 of that cohort belong to us in the partnership with the University of Queensland and Ochsner Health. The University of Queensland is credited with establishing the Gardasil vaccine to help prevent against HPV infections. The proceeds of that discovery have led to the establishment of many research entities within Queensland, including the TRI, which is the Translational Research Institute located in Brisbane. One of the nice things about the University of Queensland is that it is a top 50 global university, has remained in those rankings for a number of years. I believe this year it's 30th, if I'm not mistaken. The university is composed of 30 teaching and research sites dispersed around Greater Brisbane and also around the state of Queensland. There are 5 faculties, which include the School of Medicine and also things like law and business faculties. And there's 11 research centers and other institutes that are also spread around Greater Brisbane and throughout the state of Queensland. Next slide. So, what was the rationale for forming a partnership between our two entities, the University of Queensland and Ochsner Health? And we have established that partnership in late 2008, and we actually took in our first class of students in early 2009. So that partnership has existed since that particular time. Our first class of graduates is in 2012. So this past year, we actually graduated our 13th class. The rationale from Ochsner's standpoint was to raise our academic stature, and the rationale for the University of Queensland was to enter the partnership hoping to strengthen an already strong international multicultural environment, enrich the domestic Australian student experience. Prior to the pandemic, we had many visiting Australian students that were coming here on rotations to complete their training. The pandemic kind of slowed that down tremendously, as it did for student exchange all throughout the world. But the numbers are picking up, particularly in the last 2 years for us. And we always love having our students mingling with University of Queensland domestic students. And also, it wished to progress its research enterprise, which is probably the major diamond in the crown of the University of Queensland, is its research enterprise. Next slide. Our Doctor of Medicine program will be shared with you now, and Dr. Joseph is actually the gentleman in the middle who will be following me in his presentation. You can see two of our current students standing out in front of Ochsner Medical Center here in New Orleans, just across the street from where I'm sitting right now. Our MD program, next slide, consists of a 4-year postgraduate program. It is a full-time study program. So thinking that you can enroll in this program and hold down a job doing something else is really ludicrous. It's quite insane to think about that. So it's a full-time responsibility to be in a professional school such as medicine. Years 1 and 2 of our MD program are spent in country in Brisbane. And I'll talk a little bit more about the curriculum for those 2 years, including also what happens in years 3 and 4 when you progress to New Orleans and join us here at the clinical school in New Orleans. Our medical graduates are eligible for ECFMG certification, which is required for them to participate in the NRMP matching process. Even though you are U.S. citizens, applying to this program, you are trained in an international medical school. So by class, you're defined as an IMG. You're also eligible upon graduation of practicing in all 50 states in the U.S., and you also qualify for practice in Australia. And yes, we do have some of our graduates each year. They go back to Australia for love of someone else or love of country. Next slide. Let's talk about the various learning experiences while you're in this program, particularly in the first 2 years. It involves lectorials, which is probably very traditional classroom settings with presentations by various faculty and certain um, um, general medicine and basic science curricula. We have master classes that are dispersed all throughout 4 years of the curriculum. We have integrated symposia that also exist all 4 years throughout the curriculum. We have various workshops, clinical plenaries, which are given by some of our more gifted faculty, particularly in medicine, not only in Brisbane, but also here in New Orleans. Um, Team-based learning, or TBLs, is going to be the course of your clinical training in the first year of medical school. I'll spend a little more time on that in a subsequent slide. But yes, we do put our students in the clinical setting beginning with year 1. Um, and then there'll be practicals that will be involved, and finally, clinical and procedural skills workshops that will be occurring all throughout the 4 years of the curriculum. And it's important to keep in mind that clinical and professional learning and well-being take place from day 1 in year 1 to the final day of your training in year 4 of the program. Let's look into a little more detail at the MD program overview. Next slide. And I would just like to share with you that we're in the current phase of introducing year 4 of the MD program. As in most medical schools throughout the United States and abroad, every so often a refresh of the curriculum occurs. As we know, the knowledge base is expanding day by day by day. And as a result, a lot more needs to be incorporated into the learning environment throughout all 4 years of medical training. And there's no exception in terms of what we did in the University of Queensland Oxford Clinical School with a refresh that began actually 3 years ago. And it's the curriculum that is being taught now throughout the first 3 years. And we're introducing year 4 of that program right now. And we'll talk a little bit more about each of these years in detail. In year 1, it's really to be, I guess, in asterisk, this is the foundations of medical practice. And I guess if you're familiar with the medical training in many U.S. medical schools, we're talking about a very in-depth basic science year. It is a year-long course, 16 units. You will have 4 days in interdisciplinary learning and teaching and skills workshops, and you'll have 1 day per week in development of foundational clinical skills, which incorporate about 7 hours per session each day. As we move into year 2 in Brisbane, the asterisk or the quotations on that are developing knowledge and skills in medicine. Again, a year-long course composed of 16 units, 3 days a week of interdisciplinary learning and teaching, 1 day less than what you had in the first year, and 2 days of development of clinical skills, including clinical immersions in hospital and clinical outpatient settings, allied healthcare, GP settings, and also time on leadership and professional development as a physician. And again, you can see there's one more day that is spent outside of the classroom in that second year. And you kind of get a theme here moving into years 3 and 4. So between years 1 and 2, you become eligible to sit USMLE Step 1. And we expect you to complete that particular task and join us here in New Orleans in January. By the way, our academic years do not run like the United States from August to May. They run from January to November. So you will start the program in January. You'll complete your first year of training in November, and you will graduate from the program, I can tell you now, the Saturday before Thanksgiving in your final year of training. Once you have completed USMLE Step 1 and passed everything in the previous 32 unit courses of years 1 and 2, you will join us here in New Orleans. The quotations on this will center around clinical immersion across the life cycle. Again, a year-long course, 16 units, again, 1 day a week of interdisciplinary teaching and clinical tutorials, and 4 days of clinical experience. Longitudinal scholarly project was introduced last year into this third year, and that has turned out to be probably one of the most successful elements of the new third year curriculum. And as a result of that, I can tell you here at our cohort in New Orleans, we had 18 different projects that were completed and presented by the third year students in late October of last year. About half of those are going on to be presented at national meetings, and the other half will be published in the Ochsner Journal in next month's spring edition. We'll move now into the fourth year of the curriculum, where there's preparation for practice. And you can see that there are terms 1 through 4 that'll be looking at general practice, your clinical immersion, a personal learning elective, and critical care as prescribed rotations that will occur. And then you will enter what is called the print, which is the pre-internship term, and that will take place in probably the last 5 to 8 weeks of your fourth year. And this is really making sure everybody's ready for that transition from the classroom and from the simulation lab to moving into the hospital setting on a more permanent basis, as you will become when you graduate and start your residencies as interns. You can notice on the left side of this slide the big arrow that goes from almost white to a deep purple. And that shows the amount of classroom directed time in the upper left hand corner. And the arrow is pointing to where you are in that fourth year of the curriculum, where you're basically functioning as a clinical team member. I think something that's very important for our cohort of students is that you will actually have more audition rotation opportunities in your fourth year than we have had heretofore. And I consider many of these audition rotations as really pre-internship training because you're performing as a sub-I in those particular settings in order to perform well and hopefully get attracted into the various residency training programs of the specialty that you will choose. If we can move on to the next slide, let's touch on the research opportunities that actually exist not only in Brisbane but also here in New Orleans. And I just mentioned one of those, and it is the longitudinal component of the third year curriculum, which is very important. But UQ and Ochsner Health both have long traditions of academic excellence and scientific discovery. Our students are eligible and encouraged to participate in all the research options available to them in the medical program. However, I must admonish you now that during those first 2 years of medical school, in preparation for taking step one, um, trying to do research in Brisbane and be at the top of your class in terms of clinical and academic excellence, that's a very tough avenue for many of our students to do. It's not true for every student. There are some gifted students can walk and chew gum at the same time, but being a full-time medical student is enough in itself to be challenging you. Besides throwing some sort of research component on you at that particular time. To find out what's going on in New Orleans in terms of research, we created many years ago the Ochsner Student Research Hub, which allows all students in our program to connect with Ochsner Clinical School research supervisors to identify any areas that you may have of interest. And suffice it to say, we have interest groups that exist in all the medical specialties and many of the subspecialties that also come with a research component that you can be involved in. There's a few others that are listed down here that many of our students have been excited about being a part of. There is also an intercalated MD PhD program, if that interests anyone, where you complete your first 2 years in the program I just described, and then you will take a break and do 3 years working on your PhD requirements. And once you complete that, we'll come back and join us here in New Orleans for your final 2 years of medical training. So a total of a 7-year program that exists at that particular stage if you want to go that route. There is also a Master's of Philosophy that is available to you after completing successfully the first 2 years of training, if you so desire. And again, I want to highly emphasize the Ochsner Student Research Hub as a source to see what's going on, not only here in New Orleans, but what's happening with our students as they are immersed into the first 2 years of training in Brisbane. Next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about student support. Student support is extremely important to forming a professional physician. Um, you have to support their minds, you have to support their hearts, you have to support their hands in order for them to be successful through this rigorous training and to come out on the other end as a board eligible, board certified practicing physician. And the medical student support services exist in Brisbane and continue in New Orleans almost seamlessly. Many of the students, once they arrive in New Orleans, wish to continue working with the people that they've established a relationship during their first 2 years of medical school in Brisbane. And that's fine, but if it's necessary, you can also work closer to home if you need to. We have a complete medical student support services for years 3 and 4 here in New Orleans. As far as academic support is concerned, you will each have a personal advisor that you will have access to that can provide high impact quality support, guidance, and will help shape your student experience throughout the 4 years in the program. And it also fosters a spirit of community and connectedness. The UQ-Ochsner Medical Societies are another element that's unique to our academic support um, entities. It's led by faculty with expertise in advising and coaching of students, particularly medical students, and it also serves as social units that promote a sense of community within the Ochsner cohort, within this larger number of domestic students that exist in each class in Brisbane. And we'll talk a little bit more about the medical societies in the next slide. We also, as part of academic support, provide USMLE support, and the United States medical licensing exam comes in 3 parts. Step one, which is the boards, as I mentioned, that are given between years 2 and 3 in the program. clinical knowledge, step 2, which needs to be completed prior to the 4th year and successfully being match eligible. And step 3 usually occurs after year 2 or 3 in your residency, and it's mostly a multiple choice and clinical case scenario examination. Finally, when we start talking about peer support, we have student societies. We have the Ochsner Medical Student Association, which is actually a branch of the Greater University of Queensland Medical Society that exists for the students in Brisbane. And we also, as I said, have special interest groups. These are also student and faculty led and include um, um, programs looking at all the various specialties and subspecialties in medicine that may pique your interest in which you want to prepare yourself to be really, really ready when it comes to application time for residencies. The next slide, I'll touch on UQ medical societies. The societies, as I mentioned, were there's 5 of them, and they're named after each one of the 5 founders. And as I mentioned earlier, in year 1, students are assigned to one of the 5 medical societies, which is led by a society head, and you receive coaching and periodic visits from that particular person. And they'll also be very instrumental in coaching you through the match process and the application process. They'll be writing your medical dean letters for you at that time, so you become very acquainted with your society head and what they can offer to you in terms of rounding out your experience in our program. Next slide, please. It's my final slide. It's looking at USMLE prep and support. As far as step 1 is concerned, you can see the bullet points of the various tools that we will provide you with in the program, which includes first aid, the USMLE World Q Bank, boards and beyond. You will be given 3 National Board of Medical Examiners practice examinations to take during the latter half of your 2nd year. These are practice examinations for step 1. And then you will also receive a copy of the UQ-Ochsner Step 1 study guide. The step 2 preparation, you will also continue with the World Q Bank and various shelf exam reviews, and additional online supports will be given to you here in New Orleans. I really want to emphasize that in preparing you for the step examinations, you see all these other things that we provide for you, but probably the most important thing is for you to do as well as you can in the curriculum of the medical program as I outlined to you in years 1 through 4. Just the curriculum itself is probably your best preparation to be successful in any of the step examinations. But specifically for step 1, in year 2, semester 2, we provide a USMLE preparation course for you, and that's where the practice examinations are actually utilized. I'm now going to turn the rest of the presentation over to my colleague, Dr. Marlon Joseph. Marlon, you're up next. Next slide.
Great. Thanks, Dr. Amedee. So good afternoon, everyone. So I am happy to be here representing the UQ-Ochsner MD program as the Admissions and Enrollment Officer. And I also work as a primary care physician at Ochsner Medical Center and have done so since 2018. So I have trained in multiple, did my undergraduate degree in Miami, trained in Nashville for medical school, and then was in Chicago for a dual residency program in internal medicine and pediatrics, after which I did some time in Boston before being home here in New Orleans. And I have really enjoyed my time at Ochsner and love working with the fantastic students, some of whom you'll get to hear from later on in this presentation. Next slide. So to piggyback on Dr. Amedee's comments about the USMLE support, once again, to reiterate, the USMLE tests are necessary for medical students in order to progress onto residency. There are 3 parts, of course, and the first 2 take place during medical school. So one of the benchmarks we like to use as to how well we are educating our students is the results of our USMLE step examinations. So as you can see here, we've graduated more than 1,000 students from the UQ-Ochsner MD program, and 90% of all of those graduates have passed the USMLE Step 1 examination on the first attempt. And this is quite on par with the USMD national rate for step one passage. So after 2022, the first part of steps actually became pass-fail. So there was no longer a numerical three-digit score provided to students. And therefore, you will see only afterwards that the passage rates are in percentages. And since that time, we've still done fairly well. And greater than 90%, or over 92% of our graduates since that time, rather, have passed USMLE Step 1, which once again takes place between the second and third years of medical school. So afterwards, students do prepare for step 2, the clinical knowledge examination, or CK as we call it. And that is still given a three-digit numerical score and is an important benchmark that residency programs use to determine how well students have appropriated their knowledge during their training. And as you can see, we have phenomenal step 2 CK passage rates as well, with well over 90% of our graduates having passage, and also high passage rates. And our most recent class so far, the average score is a 256, which is a quite a stellar score. Next slide. So I'll tell you a little bit more about OMSA, which you heard a little bit about from Dr. Amedee previously. Once again, it's our Ochsner Medical Student Association, and you'll also get the privilege to hear from 2 of our OMSA representatives later on in this virtual open house. So this is the student advocacy organization that really represents the needs of students as they go through their education and training. They represent the school on several levels. So there is an OMSA representative that is selected for each of the 4 years, and it's a little bit more heavily concentrated towards the 3rd and 4th years. But students take place in many activities as it relates to advocacy on behalf of their class and cohorts. They also organize student-run activities. They participate in research, community outreach, and a host of other things. Actually, one fun event that occurs every year here in New Orleans is the annual Society Cup, where all of the 5 societies compete, and there is a point system awarded so that we can determine who rules the medical school in terms of the medical societies. So a great role that OMSA takes in helping this happen. Next slide. So you've heard a lot about the curriculum. You've heard a lot about the goals of our program. And of course, we know that all of it doesn't matter if we do not match our students into residency programs. That is the goal of our medical school, to produce phenomenal doctors that are able to match into competitive residencies. So I am very pleased to say that over the course of our program, we have been able to achieve math results that are highly comparable to that of other US medical schools. So our graduates are not only scoring highly in their step examinations, doing well in their clinical rotations, they are matching into competitive residencies across the United States. And we owe that to several different factors, we think, because of the structure that we've created here at the UQ-Ochsner MD program. So we have a very robust faculty advising and counseling system. You heard a little bit earlier about our society heads and the role that they take with students from day one in terms of career advising and counseling. And then not only that, but towards the end of your medical journey, you're going to be given additional support with respect to mock interviews, application advice, and a host of other things. So we don't just have our students become academically successful. We want them to think about what career really fits what they want to be and what they want to do as physicians. And then finally, we do have several student-driven special interest groups. Every year in the New Orleans area, we host a student interest group fair where students are showcasing some of their interest groups that may be specialty specific or maybe community based. And students do really enjoy participating in these and doing a lot of good in the community, as well as furthering their career development. Next slide. So I'm not just going to say that we match into competitive residencies or that we have a successful match rate. I'm going to show you some numbers to prove it. So this chart shows you that over the past 10 years of our program, and even beyond that, we've achieved a significantly high match rate, that which has actually matched or exceeded that of USMD graduates and that of USDO seniors as well. So this we feel like is a cornerstone of our program and our ability to really make sure that we put students in areas where they're going to be competitive and that they will also succeed. And as you can see, the numbers show that there are many residency programs in the country. However, there are also a lot of medical students applying to residency. So this is a very competitive point in your medical career. So you want to know when you are going into the medical school search process that you're choosing a school that is going to be able to accomplish this purpose of matching you into a medical school program. Next slide. So we also wanted to give you a sample of our most recent match class. So the class of 2025, class of 2024 matched in 2025. And as you can see, they went to some very competitive places. For those of you who are familiar with some of the Northeast programs, such as Brown University or Hennepin County Medical Center, we had a match at the Mayo Clinic in Arizona, as well as several students who stayed in New Orleans with us at Ochsner Health. Some students, of course, went back towards home, the West Coast being Oregon Health and Science University or University of Southern California, as well as other places like the University of Miami. And we also pride ourselves in having students match in a diverse array of specialties. We are not just limited to matching students in family medicine or in other specialties that are more common, but students match in anesthesia, emergency medicine, general surgery, neurology, OBGYN, PM&R, psychiatry, as well as others such as vascular surgery. And we owe this to the network that we've been able to build up, where students are highly competitive, they're well trained, and the reputation goes out to residency programs that our graduates are well trained and they get to be selected for these programs. Next slide. So once again, for our 2025 match class, we achieved another milestone where students were able to match along the I-10 corridor. For those of you familiar with the highway that runs across 8 states from California in the west to Florida in the east. And we, of course, love when we have students match in as many states as possible because they're going where they would like to go. And of course, we are making sure that the UQ-Ochsner brand is spreading to as many states in the country as possible. And we've matched in many states other than this in previous years as well, as you can see from the map, with that 97% match rate that we've been able to achieve. And last but not least, we also do track how well our graduates perform when they are finally in those residency programs that they are selected for. And I'll show you some data. Next slide, please. So we actually are able to survey our residency programs where our students have matched, and the programs are able to give us PGY1 evaluations for our graduates. So as you can see, we have a little bit of a lag in the data, but from the classes of 2012 on to the class of 2023, we have found that 88% of our graduates are actually in the top half of their class, with 38% being in the first quartile or the top 25% of their intern classes. So we really do see the outcome that we are looking to achieve, which is making sure that we are producing quality doctors. And as you can see, we have a 71% response rate. So with an N of 544 programs that responded. Next slide. Dr. Amedee mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the University of Queensland is a very large medical school, the largest in the country of Australia. And the cohort for the UQ-Ochsner MD program is a significant portion, as you can see. It's pretty equal to the international medical student portion, as you can see, which there are approximately 90 accepted for each of these cohorts. And then you will be working alongside, in your first 2 years, 280 approximately domestic Australian medical students. So it would be a great thing to have multiple friends, and not only in Australia, but also multiple friends that you get from around the world that you're able to train and learn with and from. Next slide. So finally, just wanted to let you know about that 2025 cohort of students who have um, come into the program. We have a pretty even split between men and women for the program, and the average age of our entrants has been 26 for this class. The average MCAT is 510, which is a strong MCAT score. Some have scored higher, some have scored slightly lower, and we have 78% of our students only possessing a master's degree, but 22% pursuing, a bachelor's degree, but 22% pursuing a master's degree or otherwise as well as some key demographics. Next slide. So with that, we'll turn it over to Ashlee Flohr once again, who's going to give you some information about applying to the UQ-Ochsner program. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Joseph and Professor Amedee. That was informative and gives a great overview of our program. Our student chat room is now open if you'd like to chat with our current students, but you can also stick around as our next part of the presentation will be taking you through our application requirements and what that process looks like. Okay, next slide, please. As I briefly mentioned before, the team both in New Orleans and Brisbane will guide you through the application process. Through the pre and post submission of your application, we're here to answer any questions that you may have about the program and its application requirements. My specific role continues as I'll work with the Ochsner cohort as your liaison for the first 2 years of the program whilst you're here in Brisbane, Australia. So let's take a quick look at the academic year and what that actually looks like. So first up, the application cycle. So we're currently open for both the January 2027 and January 2028 intakes, which gives students a little bit of flexibility depending on your own timelines. Classes generally start in late January, early February. For example, this year, our transition week commenced on Monday, February the 2nd, 2026. So that kind of gives you an idea and sense of usual timing. Throughout the year, students get a couple of week-long semester breaks, and they're a great chance to rest, reset, and even travel around and experience Australia. We have a lot to see here. The teaching wraps up around the end of October, but after that's where you have like study weeks and then exam weeks. So students can get some breathing room to prepare. Once your exams obviously finish for the year, everyone has a break until classes resume at the beginning of the following year. So that break tends to be really helpful for travel back to the US or just recharging before your next year commences. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so on this slide, I just want to quickly clarify who is eligible to apply for the UQ-Ochsner program. So only US citizens and US permanent residents can apply, and that's because the program is specifically designed for students who want to practice medicine in the United States. So if someone holds dual US, Australian or US, New Zealand citizenship, they are still eligible to apply as a US citizen. However, applicants who have Australian or New Zealand citizenship plus US permanent residency aren't eligible to apply for this program, and they'll need to apply directly through the standard UQ-MD program instead. So the key takeaway obviously is eligibility is tied to US citizenship or permanent residency because the program is structured around preparing graduates for US-based practice. Thank you. Next slide. Let's quickly talk about MCAT requirements. So as briefly mentioned before, to be eligible for the program, applicants do need a minimum total score of 504 on the MCAT. Scores below 503 can't progress. So the 504 threshold is really important. We don't look at section scores or how many times someone has taken the MCAT. We'll only consider the overall total score. And if an applicant needs to take the MCAT but can't do in that same cycle, then we'll work with you to apply for a future application round instead. Okay, next slide, thank you. On to GPA requirements. So to be eligible for the program, applicants do need at least a B average GPA. This is calculated only on what we call your key degree. So the most recently completed degree, whether it's your bachelor's or your master's, we don't calculate a cumulative GPA across every course that someone has ever taken. It's strictly that final completed degree. Because UQ, we use a 7-point scale. So we convert your GPA from the US 4.0 scale system into our 7-point scale. So applicants don't need to convert anything themselves. Our team will handle that part. All right, next slide, thanks. So we're on to assumed knowledge. Applicants applying for entry into the UQ-Ochsner MD program are not required to have completed a specific program or degree of study. The current cohort comes from a wide range of backgrounds, which we love. This includes arts, humanities, sciences, economics. For the 2027 MD intake, students will no longer be required to complete specific prerequisite subjects. So that was something that we did have in the past. But however, upon entry into the MD program, it is assumed that students have undertaken previous studies in cell biology and systems physiology and therefore have assumed knowledge in these areas. To exceed in the MD program, students are strongly encouraged to choose relevant courses in their chosen program of study or even take relevant courses as an elective. Next slide, thanks. On to the multiple mini interviews. You may have heard about these when you've started investigating our program. Eligible applicants will be ranked and invited to participate in a multiple mini interview, or we refer to them as MMIs. Invitations to interview are based on your MCAT, your GPA, and places that we have available. Interviews begin in March, so we do have our first round coming up very shortly and continue into the fall. We basically use MMIs to assess your personal qualities and values. So these qualities that we assess include things like your kindness, your compassion, integrity, your adaptability, and also your verbal communication skills. The MMI format consists of several interview sessions. You'll meet with a different assessor at each station. Each assessor will give you a score that will contribute to your overall admissions rank. All right, so next, yep, that one there we've got. So this one just gives you a brief outline of our application deadlines for the 2026 cycle for our 2027 intake. So as you can see there, we run 3 rounds of those MMIs each year. The key takeaway is that the applications close several weeks before each interview round. So if you're aiming for a particular interview date, we make sure that you submit by the corresponding deadline to be considered. As you can see there, on the 16th of February, we closed for our first round, but you definitely still have time for round 2 and round 3. So get those applications in. All right, next slide, thank you. Here's a quick overview of how straightforward our application process is. So you'll apply online through our website, and there's no application fee, there's no secondary application, we just ask for the essentials. So to get started, you'll provide your basic demographic information, upload a copy of your passport, arrange for your transcripts to be sent, but even our team will let you know exactly which official transcripts are required once we assess your application, because we don't always need every official application, because official transcript, because we know that they normally come at a cost. So if you don't have your MCAT score yet, that's completely fine. You can still submit your application. You'll just need to upload your MCAT test date or a brief document confirming that you'll share that date once it's confirmed and scheduled. And you'll also notice that we don't require letters of recommendation. We don't require a personal statement or a resume or proof of clinical experience. So this helps reduce subjectivity and ensures that our interview process focuses on you and not your ability basically to fill out paperwork. All right, next slide then. So we've got fees. always an important one. So UQ is accredited for US financial aid. So eligible students can use FAFSA. Some graduates may qualify for public service loan forgiveness depending on their employment after training. For 2026, the indicative annual program fee is $67,456 US. All right, next slide, thank you. So there are other options for funding. We do have scholarship programs that Ochsner students are eligible to apply for. We've also got something called the Ochsner Physician Scholars Program, which provides up to $135,000 US toward your medical school expenses for students who commit to working to Ochsner Health Facility for 5 years after residency. So only for those students interested in family medicine, internal medicine, primary care, internal medicine, pediatrics, and primary care, which is a dual certification, or psychiatry, which they'll be eligible. All right, next slide, thank you. So here's a few of the questions that were asked most often. So maybe they might be able to help you with your journey. So do you accept non-science majors? Yes, definitely. We absolutely accept non-science majors. Students will no longer be required to complete those specific prerequisite subjects, as I mentioned before. However, upon entry into the MD program, it's assumed that students have undertaken previous studies in cell biology and systems physiology. What makes a strong application beyond your MCAT and GPA? So we're looking for qualities like maturity, communication, and genuine interest in medicine. And those will come across when you sit your MMI, your multiple mini interview. How soon after applying might I hear back? Once you apply, you usually hear back from us pretty quickly about your next steps, typically within the week, but it can be dependent on the time of year and if we're experiencing, obviously, peak applications. What happens after I receive an offer? After you receive an offer, our team will guide you through everything that you need to prepare before arriving. We host specific webinars and information sessions throughout the year on different topics. For instance, if you are offered a position in our program or a place in our program, we have what we call an offer holder webinar, and we'll go through those next steps and even how to accept your offer. Okay. Our admissions team chat room will be open in a moment, so please feel free to visit us there if you have any questions. However, please stay online for our student panel that we have coming up. Our contact details are displayed here just in case you think of anything later on that you might like to ask. And I just want to highlight that you can book a one-on-one chat on our website also with our student ambassadors and staff if you'd like more information about the program. Thank you very much. Okay, so we might now move on to our final session for our virtual open house, where we'll be hearing from our students, both past and present, about their experiences in the MD Ochsner program. So that's awesome. We're on the slide where we need to be. So welcome, everyone. This session is about hearing directly from the people who have lived the UQ-Ochsner experience. So you'll hear from a second-year student here in Brisbane, Young, a third-year student who has just moved to New Orleans for clinical training, Tamana, and a graduate who is now practicing as a primary care physician, Dr. Davis. 3 very different components of our UQ-MD Ochsner pathway. So thank you all for being here. Oh, there's my panel. Fantastic. Can I ask you to briefly introduce yourself? We'll begin with Dr. Davis.
Everyone's doing well. My name's Marcus. I grew up actually here in New Orleans, Louisiana. I attended Louisiana State University for undergrad and then attended UQ-Ochsner for medical school. After that, graduating in 2021. I then matched in family medicine residency at East Jefferson Hospital here in New Orleans, completed 3 years in family medicine, and then reached out back to Ochsner and was very grateful and excited to start my career in primary care back here in New Orleans, in Metairie, at an Ochsner primary care facility. So I've been here for 7 months now. It's going well, still getting ramped up as far as patient load, but I'm really enjoying it. I love my colleagues here. I love working for Ochsner, a lot of support, and yeah, happy to be here. Hello to everyone.
Thanks, Marcus. Okay, next we have Tamana.
My name is Tamana. I also go by Tam, and I'm from Sacramento, California. A little bit about how I got into medicine. I was first interested in medicine from a very young age because my brother was hospitalized, unfortunately, but this led me into volunteering, and from there, the clinical experiences that I had led me to even more interest. And my brother actually went to this program, and so that was how I was introduced to UQ-Ochsner. And meeting so many alumni at his wedding who all had glowing stories of their experiences made me pretty much certain that this was the program that I wanted to come to. And I'm very excited to you all today.
Thanks, Tam. Okay, lucky last, Young. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi guys, my name is Young. Contrary to my title there, I'm a second-year medical student, although I keep introducing myself as a first year still. We just started the year, so still feels like I'm in first year. But I'm from South Korea, but I grew up in Los Angeles. Did my undergraduate at Caltech, where I graduated in biology. After graduation, I worked for a few years in a neuroscience lab before I found out about UQ-Ochsner. I actually met with an alumnus who went here, and he had such wonderful stories to tell about this program, which is part of the reason why I decided to come. So I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Young. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Dr. Davis, when you were deciding on medical school, what made this program stand out? And was there a moment when you knew that this was a right fit?
Sure. So I think there were a few things that really stood out to me. Number one, I was really excited about the opportunity to travel, which I hadn't really done much of leading up to medical school, and two, still get to end up back in New Orleans, which is where I grew up. If you meet anyone from New Orleans, we love being here, we don't like to leave, and we want to stay here for the rest of our lives. And that is true. So to have the opportunity to travel abroad to a country like Australia, which I hadn't, I've never been, didn't hear much about, but started looking into it when I heard about the program, and the opportunity to have an incredible travel experience like that, learn about another country's, medicine program, healthcare in general, their practices in comparison to ours. I thought was an incredible opportunity. And then to actually complete my clinical training in New Orleans at Ochsner for the second 2 years, 10 minutes away from home, really appealed to me personally. But to have that like tertiary healthcare center quality of clinical rotations is what really appealed to me as well. So I think those were kind of my big factors that really drawed me to the program. And once I kind of got over that, fear of traveling on a 16-hour flight to another country and not coming back for a long period of time, I kind of just said, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to look back. And it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. So I was very happy, no regrets. I loved every second of it. The opportunity to actually travel and have fun in between, studying, highly, highly recommend.
Yeah, I think that flight kind of can deter, but also really excite a lot of our applicants. So thank you so much. Tam, same for you. So when you were deciding on medical school, what made this program stand out for you?
Yeah, so I kind of briefly mentioned it earlier, but I had a pretty good example because my brother had gone to the program priorly, and he loved it. He absolutely loved his experience so much. And then I got to meet so many of his colleagues throughout his time, and all of them had such glowing experiences of getting to travel during medical school and getting to experience more balance during their study process. And that really sold me. And they also talked to me a lot about their clinical experiences in the latter half at Ochsner, and I felt like it would be a really great place to help me grow as a physician.
Thanks, Tam. And for you, Young, what made us stand out to you?
I think I'm a bit similar with Dr. Davis. I never did study abroad when I was an undergraduate. So when I heard there's a medical program that lets you study 2 years in Australia and then back in the States, I thought it sounded like a fantastic idea. I also have a lot of family in like this part of the world, so in Asia specifically. So felt like it's a little bit closer than if I'm back in the States. So that's been a nice bonus. But outside of that, I think it's just all the transparency that this program had really drew me into it, because you've got all these Zoom web sessions, seminars. You have the opportunity to speak with students as well as alumnus that all say great things about this program. I think that's sort of what like convinced me to say, okay, maybe this is a program that could be a good fit for me. So.
Great, thanks, Young. Yeah, we certainly try and look after you while you're here, both here in Australia and also in New Orleans. So that's great to hear. So every medical program has its own rhythm. So let's talk about what the MD Ochsner program is like academically. So Young, this time I might start with you if that's okay. Now that you've completed first year, what was your biggest adjustment?
Biggest adjustment? I think when I started med school, I'm like, I want to kind of learn everything. I want to memorize everything. I was trying to, focus really hard and study really hard. And I think the adjustment for me was to maybe take it a little bit easier, because it is a marathon, not a race. If you start sprinting right from the start, you might get too tired and burnt out by the end. So I feel like, it's sort of like surfing. Like you gotta like go with the waves. You can't just like try to force your way through. So that's been sort of the adjustment I made, I think, is trying to take it a bit easier and just being like, okay, as long as you know it well enough, you don't have to know everything. So, and just taking it one day at a time.
Some very fitting analogies there. Surfing and Australia definitely go hand in hand. So I like that. Thanks, Young. And Tam, how different has it been like from moving from Brisbane for your preclinical learning to now adjusting to your clinical terms back in New Orleans?
Yeah, so I only just began my transition, to be honest. I moved to New Orleans at the start of January, but the shift has been really rewarding already. I think the foundational knowledge that you build in the first 2 years in Australia has really been something that has taken on meaning now as I'm getting to engage in patient care and I get to contribute and actually be part of the medical teams. And gradually just getting more clinical responsibility. I was definitely very nervous at first, to be honest, especially adapting to a whole new city. But I think the nerves settled pretty quickly because the people have just been so great. The doctors, residents, and the healthcare teams that I've gotten to be a part of so far have been so inclusive and have just been building my confidence and being so invested in my learning and development. And so I'm honest, I felt like every time I have to say bye to a clinical team, it's kind of bittersweet because even though I am saying bye to one, I'm also equally excited to meet the next. But yeah, I think the transition has been pretty smooth and it's really a privilege to be training here.
Oh, that's great to hear. And I must say your white coat looks on point. So for all the applicants, we don't have our white coat ceremony until the end of year 2. We'll start a year 3 of the program. So that's something that you do have to wait for. It doesn't happen in your first year at medical school. But yeah, Tam is displaying her beautiful white coat for you today. All right, so Marcus, it's only been a couple of years ago, but how did you navigate any challenges that you had while studying?
I think the biggest challenge initially was, after moving to Australia, finding a place to actually live, like, rent an apartment. I remember it was like a mad rush when everyone got to Australia looking for, a place to live, roommates, etc. I think it turned out to be a great learning experience. So that was kind of fun. But then from a academic standpoint, I remember the biggest adjustment for me was just the setup of the actual UQ like academic calendar, courses, like different labs. I really loved, I don't know if it was discussed earlier, the concept of like the CBL, if that is still in play. You know, groups going to different labs together, you get to build a rapport with your like, you know, group of 10 classmates and learn together, help each other out. I really enjoyed that. We often had a lot of study sessions and learn together, reinforce topics, and just being able to, you know, fall back on your classmates that you get to know really well. So I really liked the CBL learning environment, and like the actual CBL sessions themselves, and then going to the different labs, anatomy lab, histo, with kind of the same group of people. That really helped me, you know, progress in medicine and learning and prepare me for, you know, all of my UQ exams, and then obviously the STEP exams and boards and stuff too.
Yeah, thank you for that. That is one common theme that we find with each cohort. The community feel of that cohort coming through each year is really evident. And I know, especially with a lot of the social events that the OMSA team here create, and also back in New Orleans, that was also kind of a rewarding collaborative event for most of our students. So thank you. Now, Young, I've got a question for you next. How are you feeling about the move to New Orleans next year?
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit, you know, I'm a bit apprehensive about it. It's going to be a lot of work, but I think because others have done it before me, and, you know, I know a lot of the upperclassmen. So I think one of the things is that we all get mentors, and the mentors are a year above us. And because they've sort of all went through it ahead of us, it sort of gives us the confidence to say, okay, we should be able to adjust and adjust quickly. And if we need to, we can rely on their help and support and advice. So I think it'll go well.
Positivity, I like that, and it will go well. It'll be absolutely great. You'll do great. So now we're kind of talking about, now that we've obviously talked about, like, you know, getting into the program, your way through the program. I've got a question for Marcus next about culmination and graduation. So looking back, how did this program prepare you for residency?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. In my opinion, the UQ program places a large focus on actual like clinical practice at a very early point, you know, in years 1 and 2. And that's something I really enjoyed at the moment, because I always found that I learned better when I had an actual person or patient to examine, to talk to. And I think that really stuck with me, even just like practicing on each other, like with the physical exam sessions and CBL once a week with our instructors. I think that really translated the most into residency, as opposed to just, you know, sitting in a classroom, which is obviously important in itself, but having that early exposure to like the hospital settings, the wards in Australia, and then the actual like clinical practice weekly sessions really translated into residency for me, because I felt very comfortable already, like after year 2 of med school, examining patients, and then I guess more importantly transitioned into year 3, you know, for clinicals back in New Orleans. I already felt very well prepared for being in the wards, examining patients in a clinical setting, and that really has, you know, I think carried over into the next several years into residency, and even still now. So I felt very well prepared from like a clinical standpoint for both rotations and residency. I think in large part due to that early clinical experience in years 1 and 2.
Yeah, great. And so obviously training across those 2 healthcare systems as well has influenced, do you think, the way that you practice?
I think so. It definitely makes you appreciate a lot of you know, different perspectives, people from different walks of life, different countries. I think it's definitely made me more open-minded in practice. You know, there's a lot of different ways to practice medicine, you know, with regards to natural versus, you know, medical approaches. You know, there's a lot of examples. So I think it's definitely made me more open to obviously the patient perspective when it comes to different topics of healthcare. And I think in large part makes me a better physician because of that.
Thanks, Marcus. Okay, so I do have a question for Tam next. So how has this journey so far changed you outside of academics?
I think that's a great question. I think just having to move to a whole nother continent, quite frankly, has built a lot of resilience in me. As much as I thought it would be pretty easy because I'm like someone who really enjoys an adventure, it definitely came with its own unique challenges. But I think overcoming each of those challenges as they came my way is something that I now like can pride myself on and feel like confident if something like that were to yeah, I really think that just getting to be so fluid and flexible in where you are, because you do have to move to Australia first and then to New Orleans, it builds a lot of like adaptability and flexibility and resilience that I don't think I would otherwise have.
Yeah, I think for a country that we share so much, we can also be so different in so many ways. For instance, I know that our Aussie slang challenges a lot of our new US students, and even the concept of Vegemite always gets everybody, but it's okay, and you do learn to love it. Young, one for you. Do you have a moment so far along your journey that's challenged you but ultimately made you stronger?
Yeah, I guess so. I think the toughest for me so far was maybe last year around when we were doing the cardiology block. That's pretty tough, but I think it kind of rolls back to what I was saying earlier about how you just sort of gotta roll with the waves. You can't, try to be too stressed and trying to force everything through. I think that was sort of the lesson I took away from that, where I felt like I needed to do everything all at once, all the time. And I think that's certainly not always the best case to do, because sometimes you really got to take care of yourself as well. So I think about that point was when I really started to, I think, thrive in medicine. Is that was a transition point for me, where I guess that sort of difficult block period in my first year medical school journey sort of helped me grow as a student. And sort of, I think now I'm at a point where like, the study materials and the volumes, like it doesn't phase me as much as it did before. So, yeah.
And it is a bit of an adjustment starting medical school. It's not like anything that you have ever done before. And especially when we throw in the component of moving internationally and even, accommodation, visas, immunizations, all sorts of different things. So it isn't for everybody. However, we always try and support our cohort and new cohorts and students as much as possible. And I think that's evident even with the three of you here today. So thank you so much. Before we do finish up though, bit of a random one. We do have, one word you could use to describe Brisbane and one word you could use to describe New Orleans. I will start with Marcus. You can go first. One word for Brisbane, one word for New Orleans.
Ooh, putting us on the spot. I like it. I'll start with New Orleans because that's easier since I'm from here. I'll say festive for New Orleans. And then Brisbane, that's a tough one. One word. It's a little simple, but I'll go exciting. But I think it's true.
I like it. I think festive is really fitting for New Orleans, especially like you just had Mardi Gras. Was that last week? Yeah. So obviously one of probably the most festive places in the world. Tam, you're next. One word for Brisbane, one word for New Orleans.
For Brisbane, I would probably say sunshine. There's so much sunshine. I love it. And then for New Orleans, I would probably say just vibrant. It's so colorful and beautiful here.
Awesome. Fantastic. And Young, lucky last. One word for Brizzy, one word for New Orleans.
Let's see, Brisbane. I would say I've been trying to learn this word, but I think maybe it fits, I don't know, but cheeky, because, you know,
Yeah,
it's
okay, we're
like
a bit cheeky. All right, I like
it's a
it.
bit cheeky, I'd say. And for New Orleans, I haven't been, so I don't know if I can say a word, but, you know, I heard culinarily it's great, so maybe food. So
Awesome. Yes. It is known for food as well. So awesome. Thank you so much again. Thank you for all being so open about this and about your experiences. And for those listening, you've just heard 3 very different chapters of our UQ-Ochsner story. And if you can see yourself somewhere in that journey, we'd love to obviously continue that conversation. So that is, I think we're up to the end of our session. Thank you again for Dr. Davis, Tamana and Young for being here. It's been great hearing all your stories, and Tamana and Young, I look forward to seeing where you both end up once you graduate. So that's our virtual open house complete. I hope that you found this session informative and helpful. Our contact details are displayed again for you if you've missed them earlier. And thanks for joining us today. We look forward to receiving your application and hopefully seeing you in Brisbane and then New Orleans soon. So thanks very much.